everybody. So very pleased now to introduce our second presenter for today, Graduate Research Day, who is Miss Nelly Leon, and she's currently working in the career development in SEPA. But you see, and I don't want to steal her thunder, she's going to be a lot more present within engineering for reasons that she will explain herself. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Nelly Leon, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Nelly Leon. I work as a career coach and work with employers in the Stephen J. Green School of International Public Affairs. And so I'm very excited to share that in the next few weeks, coming into the next month, I'll have more of a presence here in engineering, working in the Career Talent Development Office. So if you don't know where that is in the pit. Go check us out. We have a lot of resources, and if you need help with your CVs, cover letters, any mock interviews, salary negotiation, where to look for jobs, that is your new best friend. So it's a pleasure to meet you. This will be a little bit interactive today, so don't be shy. I do welcome my students. You're here to use your phone or your tablets, because I'll be like, hey, I need you to look something up. So, be engaged, ask questions as well. And I'm really also excited to share, she's not here physically with me, but Jessica Armenteros is the career coach here for the College of Engineering students. And you can find her also in the career office, in the student pit, or virtually. So just know you have a resource here if you have any types of questions. So today we're going to talk about CV writing. And I want to just get an idea here. How many of you are master's students? Doctoral students? Undergraduates? Okay. It's okay. Just like to get an understanding of who's the population here. I don't go through this in detail, but just to know that here in the career office, our goal is to help you students, master students, undergraduates, doctoral students, alumni, even after you graduate, with your career questions, career help. So know that you have a resource for you, all right? And we service any FIU student or alumni. Right? We tell students, individuals with disabilities, LGBTQ, international students, come see us for assistance. We will help everyone. So what are we going to cover today? For today's purpose of this session is that we're going to look at what is the intention of a CV, a curriculum vitae. We're going to look at the differences between a resume and a CV. Some of you might be like, what does that mean? We're going to look at also common errors in CV writing and really looking at all the components in a CV. I always start our presentations also by sharing with students that employers are looking for you, and they're looking for you with certain top skills. Okay? I'm not going to go into detail, but every year, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, known as NACE, surveys hundreds of employers. And the association asks employers, so what do you look for in candidates? Why do you hire them? These are the top 8 skills from last year that employers were surveyed on. I bring this up because when we look at CV writing, one of the skill sets you need to be proficient with is communication skills, right? With a CV, don't you have to write? The CV, that's a piece of your promotion, your marketing, to market yourself when you start looking for jobs. And so just keep in mind, that's one of the skills to be looked at when we're doing CV writing. But in general, as you're working on your CV, is that think about the part-time jobs you've had, even if they don't relate to your major in engineering. Think of the volunteer experience, co-curricular experience, internships, coursework, class projects that you've done in class, and some of the skills that you may have attained through there, right? It may be an intimidating list. So I tell students, okay, you may not have leadership skills yet, but in a class, did you have to take the lead with a project? Did you have to delegate? Or maybe you worked at Starbucks and you had to train the new employees that came in. That's leadership skills. So something for you to consider as you're going through writing your CV. What are those skills that are really top skills that you should also take into consideration? So I already gave you a little hint of why would you need a CV, but can you share with me, why do you think you need a curriculum vitae, a CV? Take a guess.
To market yourself?
Yes, definitely to market yourself.
To get a job. Can't get a job without one.
To get a job. Any other reasons?
Let the employer know that you're the right choice.
Excellent. Really, really great answers. So let's take a look. Before I even go into that, I also want to share with you, I'm going to share, if you can go into this website, it's actually career.fiu.edu. That's our main career talent development website. So use your phones, okay, tablets, computers, whatever you have in front of you. Go into career.fiu.edu. And once you're there, click on the tab Handouts and Resources. Then you'll go to Resumes and Cover Letters. And you're going to select the link that says CV Example. Let me know when you're there, when you've got the CV in front of you. Yep, I see it. Okay, a few hands raised. Nods. All right. Talk to me. What are your observations of that CV? And we're not going to be here 5 minutes. We're going to be here quick 20 seconds. What are you seeing in that CV that stands out to you? You can see hand raised?
I'm not seeing the last CV example of the resumes.
So it's going to be under Handouts and Resources. And when you go into the Handouts and Resources, there's a section called Resumes and Cover Letters. And then there's a link. So you're going to open it. Open the plus sign.
On resume, right?
Yes. Yep. There you go. And then you're going to scroll down. You're going to see the CV example. Make sure to click on the plus sign. What are some of your observations with that CV?
So for things that stands out to me is that they summarize your qualifications right away on the top.
Summary of qualifications. So in other words, like the 30-second elevator pitch.
Right.
Then tell me about yourself in 30 seconds. The profile. Okay. What else? Yes.
It also includes publications, conferences, presentations, things you wouldn't really include in a resume because you just don't have the space for it.
Great observation, especially if you're working on your doctoral degree, right? Are those some of the areas that you work on, right? Publications, committee work.
Adding to what he said, I was always told it had to be like 1 page.
Good observation. How many pages is that CD?
1.5.
Okay. Any other observations?
Thanks.
Anyone else before I go to the next slide? So I'm going to jump into the branding of the CV and then look at the observations of what you're looking at, right? So yes, you're right. That CV you're looking at right now is interesting. You mentioned that summary. You have really, when you're applying for jobs, how many of you have heard of an applicant tracking system, ATS? So when you're applying to jobs, have you heard or read articles that they say, oh my gosh, there's thousands of resumes, thousands of applications coming in for jobs? And can a human pair of eyes look at all those documents? Can a team of 2 people in human resources look at all those documents for hiring managers? So many Fortune 500 companies, federal government, FIU, many organizations have what they call an applicant tracking system. And in doing so, that ATS, I'll talk about it a little bit more later on, is that profile summary that you shared, those publications that you shared, you might be seeing keywords in that CV. The applicant tracking system is using that information to give you points compared to your competition over here if they are not putting keywords related to the job description on the application or CV. So it's really important that as you're writing a CV that you're keeping in mind, right, custom building a CV to a job description or an internship description, but it is your branding tool. It communicates the qualifications and the experience that you have. I have many students, like I said, how many of you have worked in retail or food? It's okay, be proud of it. It's all, how many of you have worked in jobs that you would say, it doesn't have anything to do with my major? Yeah, many of us started that way, right? We had to pay for bills or we needed to get experience. I tell students, they'll say, I don't think I need to include that in my CV. And I'll say, but did you problem solve when you were working that job? Did you have to communicate with others? Did you have to apply critical thinking skills? So you might think a job that doesn't relate to your major shouldn't be on a CV, but when in fact, remember those top skills employers want? Those are transferable skills that also translate in your CV to qualifications that could count. We talk about accomplishment statements in CVs. I'll share with you a little bit about that, but the document shows off results, not just that you provided customer service or that you used SQL, right? What was the result of that? What was the outcome? I always say, how many of you have been on a first date before? Or how many of you have had an experience where you met someone for the first time? Be just about everyone. I mean, I don't know, pre-pandemic, right? But when you first met someone for the first time, I mean, today, how many of you met me before today? How long does it take for you to get an impression of that person? Seconds. What else? All right, seconds. Yes, it takes seconds. Just like the applicant tracking system. When you apply for a position, it's milliseconds, right? That they're screening your CV. And that's what the CV is. It's your first impression. If you have spelling errors, if it's not formatted to how it should be, that could take you out of the process. And yes, you're right. Somebody said to get a job, but it is your next step in securing an interview. So some of you might be asking, so what's the difference between a resume and a CV? The difference is that a resume is usually no more than 2 pages. It's a summary of the experience and skills relevant, right, to that job description. The summary is not meant to include all of your experiences, all of your background information. So the resume is like the short summary, right, of your experience and skill sets. The CV, it could be 3 pages, 4 pages, 5 pages. A CV, and I'm just curious, how many of you here have attempted or have a draft of a CV? All right, there's, more than I thought. Okay, all right, more than, so 50% of you. That's pretty good. Well, for those of you that may not know, there is no minimum pages. The other thing about the CV is that it's almost like an archive of all the experiences that you have. But you have to be careful, because I tell students and alumni, be careful not to go back more than 10 years, because that could be a factor for ageism, right? When you're applying for jobs. But the case is different if you're applying for maybe like mid-level or senior type positions, tenure type positions that, well, you need to showcase the experience, and that's okay. If you have any questions, by the way, just raise your hand. Feel free to ask. I'm not sure, I'm not seeing the participants in Zoom, so if you can please let me know if there's questions as well. Thank you. So here's just a little bit more in terms of the intention between the CV and the resume as a branding tool. I already talked a little bit about that. One of the things I did want to share with you is it's one thing to understand how to write and understand the foundation of how to write a CV, right? Formatting, talk a little bit about that. Formatting, information, how it's aligned, structured. But it's another thing in terms of making sure that your CV document is custom built to each job or internship description that you apply to. And this, I would say, would apply to both the resume and the CV. There it says, it doesn't need much alteration to fit the job posting. I'm a believer that anytime you write a resume or a CV when you're applying to a job, that you want to custom build it to that position or that internship description. We'll also talk a little bit more about that. So we go back to that CV that I asked you to look up, right? Observations. I know, I'm asking you to go back and look at it again. Here's just an example, but what other observations do you see in that document?
Chronologically, each section goes present to past.
Yes. Very good. Any other observations that you may have not noticed here?
There's a specific hierarchy on the information, the structure, the hierarchy of, important to perhaps less important.
Yes, for categories, especially if you're going to custom build a CV to a job description or an internship. So let's say you're applying for a research position academically. And that research position requires research skills, analytical skills, presentation skills. Well, if you have done a senior capstone project or a thesis on research or published on research, then you're going to want to move up your categories that showcase your research information to the top of the resume below the education section, right? So it's like you want to do a shift on what is most important, the priority to match to that job description. We don't like paragraphs in CVs. So how many of you have a document, a CV, and you've written your work responsibilities as paragraphs? No, we recommend, I see the nods. We recommend use bullet points to identify your work responsibility senses for each of your jobs. Why?
Easy to read.
Thank you. Yes, I think you were in my head. It is easy to read. It's much easier, right, to identify the information. Please don't use fancy fonts or fancy, like Legally Blonde, pink paper. Trust me, I've seen it. Flowers, fancy borders and designs. Applicant tracking systems do not like fancy fonts, images. I have a lot of students that put their pictures. Now keep in mind, if you worked or you were studied before or transferred or you're an international student, came from Latin America, the Caribbean, Europe, Asia, Africa, that is custom on CVs to put your picture. It is custom to put your age, your marital status. The more personal, the better, right? In those countries. Here in the US, You'll notice our CVs are boring. Black and white, business, right? Like not personal information is not what we put on our documents. Nothing fancy, no pictures. And all the space, the font, all the content in the CD, as you can tell, is being used on the page. There's no what we call white space. Things, how many of you have on your CVs or your documents FL, BS for a degree, BA for a degree, MS? Abbreviations? Well, if a job description is asking for requirements in the education to be a bachelor's of, a master's of, please don't write BS or BA in your education section. Write it out. Applicant tracking systems sometimes don't like the abbreviations. So keep that in mind. Spelling check. How many of you rely on spell check? But have you noticed sometimes it doesn't catch the errors? So I recommend, okay, use spell check when you're writing your CV, but have a few human eyes look at your resume. Like go make an appointment at our career office here, or upload your resume to Handshake, or upload it to VMOC. Have Jessica look at the resume so that you can have additional proofreading. Okay, because that could be definitely a deal breaker if you have typos in that CV. The hiring manager is going to be like, so they didn't pay enough attention to detail. Lots of errors. And if I'm going to put them in front of clients, they have to do work with other people in the company and they can't spell, that's an issue. We recommend do not use personal pronouns when you're writing your summary or work responsibility sentences or publication or research information. Use adjectives, action verbs. And common components. How many of you have some of these already on your CV? If you can shout it out or raise your hand. What is it that you have?
Well, I have my contact information, my application, my work, my honors and awards, languages, computer skills.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's it.
That's it. Okay. Does anyone have any additional?
I
Yes.
also have my various volunteering things from high school or in my time as an undergrad.
Okay.
Some of my more major academic projects, the couple leadership positions I've had, and the rest same.
Anyone else have anything different? So if you in the future decide to go do a study abroad or do volunteer or take on a leadership experience, maybe with a club on campus, consider adding these additional categories, right? Because it also diversifies your experience. It makes you stand apart from your competition. Look all around you. Look at your neighbors. Look behind you. This is your competition. The people in your classes are your competition. The hundreds of students, thousands of students graduating from the college are your competition, including the universities nationwide. Right?
So for study abroad, do you include even if it's not related to anything like, I don't know, Italy, went to study abroad in Italy to learn a language, like would you include that study abroad?
I would include it on a CV. What if you go and you apply for a job for a global, we're in a global market, a global workforce. I mean, studying abroad, didn't that expose you to being uncomfortable in a different culture? Didn't you have to learn a different language? You spent a semester, right, studying the language, collaborating with others, maybe in your classes for projects. Well, in the workforce, how many times are you going to have to collaborate with others? Work with diverse people. Maybe you find a job in Kansas. I tell you, that's a culture shock. That's a different culture, right? Maybe you find a job in a global company, and guess what? They have maybe units or areas in Italy. that they worked in, or a country where you did a study abroad. Is it going to make you different from your competition? How many of you here have done study abroad? 2. Is it 2? Just raise your hand really high. I need to see it, and I want the rest of you to see it. So when they go on a job interview, what's different? That study abroad diversifies you. The purpose with me telling you this is each of you. If there's something that makes you stand apart and different, even if it doesn't relate to the major, but there's transferable skills, add it to your resume because that makes you different, right? Adaptable is another one. Did you have to adapt when you went to do study abroad? Well, in a new job or internship, don't you have to adapt? Other categories, how many of you speak 2 or more languages? Yep, just almost everybody here, right? 2 or more languages, 3 or more languages? All right, 4 or more languages. How many of you have your languages in your CV or your document? Okay, for those of you that don't, I would recommend, okay, almost everybody has. Okay, but if you don't have it, add your languages to your CV. Right? Because how many of you will have to work again with people from different cultures, clients? So that makes you marketable. Remember, here in South Florida, there's different colors, right? All of us different colors. We speak different languages. We see a pool of diversity here, just even in here in this class right now. But how many of you have traveled to Naples, Florida, Texas, Wyoming, not that far, Jacksonville? Having the understanding and mastering, having languages, being able to adapt with different cultures, being respectful of different cultures, and I don't mean cultures also, but populations. Think about it, individuals with disability, LGBTQ, veterans, all these different populations, that makes you marketable. How many of you have seen internship or job descriptions that say must work effectively with diverse populations or work with others from different cultures? Okay, so again, putting things into perspective for you. If you presented at conferences, presented a proposal, if you attended a conference, if you're a member of a professional association, clubs or organizations on campus, computer skills. I mean, these are hard skills. How many of you have been studying your technology, software applications, languages, technical wise, and how much is that on your CV? It should be, because I'm going to show a slide in just a second. But think of all these things to add that are just not education and work experience, right? Common components of a CV. If you're a TA, any TAs here? Please don't write on your CV TA for biomedical engineering and that's it. As a TA, don't you have to teach? Don't you have to grade? Maybe create lesson plans? Don't you have to speak with students? Have maybe awkward conversations about the grade, right? Those are transferable skills. Communicating, verbal. You have to probably write lesson plans, communicate verbally, solve problems as a TA, grade. So consider making sure you have that experience there. References. You can add your references. Don't make sure you add your best friend Pepito down the street to be a reference. Right? They have to be quality references, professional references, unless the job asks you to include a personal reference. And make sure, don't blindside them, and you apply, and they get a call from the company, and they're like, oh, they applied? Oh, what did they apply for? Notify your references ahead of time that you're applying. And make sure you select references that can speak positive on your behalf. They know the quality of your work. Because the worst thing that's happened to me, a student blindsided me. They put me as a reference, and they didn't see me all the time for career coaching. They saw me like one time, and I couldn't really speak on the behalf of that student. So, right, you want to make sure that that reference speaks highly of you. We talked about this, standard components, objective statements. Do any of you have an objective statement? It is outdated. It's been outdated for like 15 years, an objective statement on a CV. The only time would be if maybe you're talking to the recruiter, networking with them at a career fair, they say, yeah, I put an objective statement. It's really to say, to obtain a civil engineer position for, I don't know, Amazon. But to me, it's a waste of ink on a CV. You're already applying for that position. So we recommend don't do an objective statements. If you have to, you can put a summary, and even a summary is optional to include on your document. This is considerations for the name header. How many of you have a LinkedIn profile? Have you had someone look at it from our career office to make sure the picture is not of you on vacation, you know, or your beach shorts, because I've seen that you have a professional LinkedIn profile that looks professional. If you're not sure, go make an appointment with Jessica here in the career office before you put your LinkedIn URL on your CV. How many of you have maybe an electronic portfolio? Okay, we got to talk about electronic portfolios for another topic because that could really be a branding factor for your interviews or getting your foot through the door, right, for job searches. But if you do have an electronic portfolio, add it to your CV. It is optional to add your address. Any of you thinking for the future to move outside of South Florida for work? So it's optional. You don't have to put your address in your CV, okay? Only because that might make it harder for you if you do put your address and you want to move to Atlanta, but you're not there yet, or Washington, D.C. Unless you put in your cover letter, we'll be relocating. So we just find that sometimes it's a little bit harder when you put your address and you're looking to leave the city, right, to look for jobs. So it's optional. This is just what the name header would look like. And like I said, if we run out of time, I'll be sending the document, these PowerPoint slides, to Orlando and the team to share with you. And this is being recorded too, so they can share this recording with you. This is an example, a summary of the summary. Any observations with the summary? What do you see that stands out?
No action verbs?
Well, ability, creative problem solver, it's an adjective. Yeah, there's a few action verbs in there. There's adjectives too. But there's a few verbs in there, yeah. What else? You see any personal pronouns like I, my, I did this? Is it to the point? Is it clear for you to understand what they bring to the table? What do they bring to the table? What skills do they bring to the table?
Leadership, communication skills.
Leadership,
Communication.
Photoshop, Office, yeah. Question.
On that, what about eliminating words that may seem unnecessary? If I'm applying for a job that requires Photoshop, I don't need to tell that person that Adobe makes Photoshop. Why not just say, I have skills in Photoshop? Why say Adobe makes Photoshop?
Good question, because what if the job description does say you need skills in Adobe Photoshop and you left it out?
No, I'm gonna say I have skills in Photoshop, I just don't wanna include the Adobe part.
But the applicant tracking system is based on points. They give you more points if you're including the verbs or the keywords from the job description. So I recommend, if you can, make sure to mirror, not copy paste, don't plagiarize, but mirror as much as you can the keywords from that job description to your CV. Because the ATS, once it's screening candidates and taking from her, from the competition, they're scoring based on points. And whoever has the most points through the ATS for the candidates, that's who gets passed through. Good question. Keywords. Let me just double check. How are we on time? Oh, okay, 15 minutes. That's okay. We're okay. So it's really important. We're going to get into that, right? The importance of writing like accomplishment statements, writing your work experience sentences. As you notice here, we recommend, again, highly recommend looking at that job description. It's like your source. How many of you have written research papers or written papers for class? Should be all of you, right? You go to the FIU libraries, look at peer-reviewed articles, scholarly articles, look, right? Isn't that your source? And then you analyze the information, identify, and don't you take that information and then start creating your research paper, your papers? The custom building of a CV is the same strategy. What's the source? The job description or the internship description? What's the paper? Your CV. So think about this. You're already using those skills in class to write papers, to look at sources. Now you're just using those skills for a job search in CV writing. So that's really, it's important to be looking at those keywords, right, from the job description that match to your skills. This was the objective. We talked about that. Here's another example of a summary of qualifications. And there's different ways to write a summary of qualifications. It could be 3 sentences of a paragraph with bullets that get to the point, right, of those keywords. We have, under the handouts and resources, CV resumes, a whole bunch of other resume samples. Here's just a generic in terms of what an okay summary compared to a better summary looks like. What's the difference between the two?
It's very specific.
Which one?
The second one is very specific. It's gonna be a lot of details. Wow.
So think about as you're writing, if you decide to do a summary, a profile summary, to go for that second version. Again, you're telling the story, you're giving your elevator pitch in like 30 seconds. In terms of education and training, I recommend including your degrees. I don't recommend high school, bachelor's, master's. If you're a doctoral candidate, make sure to add that. If you have minors, make sure to add it as well. How many of you have done certifications or certificates? At least maybe one or a few of you. Make sure to add that to your CV because that makes you marketable. How many of you have done design projects, research projects? To showcase that information. You can add that as well. Anything that you learned in the classroom that was a project that you had to work with others, right? Play in the sandbox, collaborate, write, verbally write, communicate, problem solve, analyze, publicly present. Those are all skill sets that are transferable in a job. Look at me. What skills have I been using for the last half hour? Public speaking. Right, I updated these PowerPoint slides, right? So think about it in your jobs. Did I think when I was 20 I was going to be using these skill sets? No idea, and here I am, right? Just like many of you will probably be using these skill sets. This is just, again, a take on the attributes that employers are seeking for in you.
Can you speak a little bit about the awkwardness of filling that identity questions on when you are filling out, the electronic form of gender and identity and race?
Oh, well, actually, I have a slide a little bit on that.
All right.
It touches on that, so I'll bring it to that. Thank you. So again, look at Being able to work with, how many of you have to collaborate? Whether in your class, how many of you work? Part-time, full-time, volunteer, clubs, right? You're working with others. How many of you have to solve problems? Yeah. Every day, not even in our personal lives, right? But you don't put that on the CD. But yeah, so think about these things, right? Analyze, communicate. Wanted to just bring this out for you in terms of skill sets to consider in your engineer majors. We're not talking only about your hard skills. And when I mean hard skills, right, like those applications, hardware, software, I don't mean languages like knowing Portuguese and Spanish, right? I'm talking about languages in terms of technology, hard skills. I'll be honest with you, my husband is a computer programmer for a decade, well, a long time. And he has to meet with clients. He can't just hide in his office and program and do the databases, right, and do his actual hard technology skills. He has to leave his office and he has to present to the dean. He has to talk to faculty, to clients about the work that he's doing. He has to write proposals. So it's really important that as you're writing your CV, it's not just about, right, what you're learning in class in terms of those hard skills, but think about what you're learning in class, your part-time jobs, the study abroad, those other skills that are going to help you in terms of soft skills. Being able to talk to people. Like someone like me, that's a user. And you're going to have to help me understand why my internet broke down or why the printer is not working. Here's a couple of ways that you can show off your skills, technical skills on your CV. Do you find this helpful? Are you showcasing your hard skills like this on your CV? Some of you are like, oh, yeah, maybe not. So, and if you need help, like I said, make sure to go seek out our career office. Are there any technology majors in here, or is it all engineering, all different engineering disciplines? Okay, just in case there are technology, know that we also have our career coach that works with the technology students. And then a couple, again, just suggestions in terms of when you're writing out your work experience sentences, how you want to make sure that you use bullet points, use those action verbs, use numbers or percentages to showcase results. Not with every sentence, but it stands out. It shows that, maybe you can work with 10, 20, 30 people at the same time that you're having to do another responsibility on the job. We've talked about avoid paragraphs, incorrect grammar, what to include. Do any of you have your company addresses, phone numbers, or supervisors' information tagged onto each company? I recommend when you're looking for jobs at private sector, nonprofits, NGO think tanks, academia, institutions, you don't need to, you just include the company name, the job title, the work durations, and the work responsibility sentences. If you are looking for jobs in federal government hires engineers. You may not know that. I work with a lot of federal agencies in the Green School that want to hire our students. And they don't all want to hire international relations majors. They want IT. They want engineers. And if you're looking for federal government, that is a different sample of a resume. It's actually in that handouts resources that I shared with you, federal resumes. But in that case, you would include the address and phone number and your supervisor's contact information. Okay. Any military veterans in the house? Veterans? Well, if there's any veterans that are listening to this, you can utilize ONET Online. That is a really cool occupation industry website that we use as a tool to help our veterans, the work and the jobs they did when they were in the military, translated to civilian verbiage. Okay? So just something to think about. Also, I tell my students, how many of you maybe, like I mentioned, how many of you worked retail or valet, worked at, hospitality, something that had nothing to do with your major? Many of you, many of us, right? So I teach students to use Own It online if they're struggling with, okay, what did I do as a barista at Starbucks? Or I was a valet driver. I just gave the keys and drove cars. No, you did much more than that in terms of your transferable skills. So you can type, this is what I did for robotics. I'm like, let me see if robotics engineers pops up. Guess what? It pops up. And look at those skill sets. So that can help you understand what are the technologies being used, what skill sets, if you have them, to include them in your CV. So it's something to consider. Got 5 minutes, okay. Quick question, this is a quiz for you. Which do you think is the most competitive statement for a CV? I'm gonna call for a vote, so you can tell me in a minute. I'll call for the vote. Which one do you think is the most competitive statement? We ready? Not yet, okay. Okay. You should be ready by now. Okay, how many of you vote for number 1? That's the most competitive statement for a CV. No takers for number 1. Okay, how about number 2? No takers? What about number 3? Oh, number 3. Now, why would you say number 3? Tell me.
Numbers, it's got the number 1,500 personnel, it's volumes there.
Okay. Does that stand out to you? Any other takers? Why would you take number 3?
It's 2 verbs, developed and executed.
Those are pretty high impact verbs. So you're all right. Congratulations, but I don't have a gift for you. I'm sorry. But yes, so you want to see the difference, right? What makes an impactful accomplishment statement compared to one that's less? How many of you have the word responsible on your CVs? You've used the word responsible. There's got to be at least one of you here. I know, because I look at a lot of resumes and CVs. We avoid using passive words like responsible, duty such as, because they're passive. It doesn't really get to the action, the behavior of what you did in the job. So it's about when you're writing your responsibilities, your work sentences, even for your class projects, your design projects, for volunteering, or you hold leadership responsibilities within a club or organization, or you're publishing. What's the sentence that's going to make the most impact? Have you done work that has allowed you to be efficient, right? Maybe there are cost savings. So things to think about as you're writing your work responsibility sentences. Don't just write, designed a robot. Well, I watched the bots competition on TV. I know there's a lot of work, detail that takes it. So you, again, what is going to showcase, did you make a change or improvement? What was the impact? I mentioned the gatekeeper being the applicant tracking system. So just know that you've got to custom build your documents, because the applicant tracking system is what most, like I said, Fortune 500 companies, government, FIU, higher ed, academic settings are using to screen their candidates. It's pretty much everywhere, the system. Maybe your smaller mom and pop shops don't have that tool, but it is based on points, and like we said, majority of companies are using them. We won't have time for this, but I do recommend that if you're interested in custom building a resume to a job description, make an appointment, go visit our career office here in the student pit, make an appointment in Handshake so that you can go ahead and really learn the mechanics. That's what's going to make you competitive from each other, the students in your classes, and from your thousands and thousands of competition nationwide and globally. This is about job requirements when you're reading reading job descriptions. Just really understand what the required skills are compared to desired, preferred. Make sure that when you're looking at a job description or internship that you meet those requirements. Because if you don't, it's going to probably take you out of the race for the applicant tracking system. And references, I'll include this in the slides and the recording so the students can see what it's like to make sure that you write a formatted structure for your references. What not to put, Orlando, this is to your question. What not to put on your CV, but also when you're completing an application. It is illegal in the U.S. Now, does it happen? Well, maybe sometimes it might. But it is illegal to be asking, like during interview questions, right? Sexual orientation, marital status. Are you planning to have kids? Right? Those are illegal questions. So please know that that is information you should not be on your applications.
So about the previous slide, the references, do you recommend that we add it automatically at the end, or should that be a separate?
So with a CV, you could add it at the end. I've written a CV before, I've written a resume. I've tended to leave out the references. And I still got the job because I had to put the references in the online application. So it's like wasted ink, but you have an option. There's no wrong or right. So good question. Also, if you're an individual with disability, don't disclose that. You don't have to disclose that unless you need an accommodation. Okay. Use VMock. VMock is our AI tool. Students love it. I just talked to a student last week. He made an appointment with me for resume, but he used VMock before the appointment, and that resume looked spectacular. That CV looked spectacular. Here's ways to get a CV review. Like I mentioned, you can use the drop-in program that we have, virtual or hybrid. Use VMock, attend a resume workshop, request an appointment with Jessica. Different ways to find resume samples. You can upload the resume to Handshake for review. Check out all our events, upcoming workshops. Our office, like I said, here in Engineering Center is in 2852, or if you're in Sask, you can also use that office. And are there any questions? I know it was a lot of information I covered today. Oh, yes.
I have a question about including. Do you include like if you're an international student or something like that?
I would recommend not including that status on your CV. Okay. When you're completing an application for to work, what will come up is, are you authorized to work in the U.S.? Is that correct? Have you seen that? Are you authorized to work in the U.S.? So for international students, I recommend always make sure to go visit the ISSS office, MMC campus, the Office of International Studies Scholar Services. I could have misstated it, but ISSS, if you Google FIU ISSS, make sure you speak with them so that you understand the policies and protocols for status to get an internship or to work after graduation, right? Once you get your CPT or OPT is what they call, like your work permit, you are authorized to work in the U.S. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. So it usually comes up like, are you authorized? And then you respond yes, and then it says, will you need sponsorship in the future?
Yes.
Like the second question.
So,
Yeah.
right, so if you need to, you select yes. If you don't, you
But
select
you don't
no.
include it in your resume, right? Like
No, do not include that in your resume. But always go see ISSS. Any other questions? Where's the College of Engineering Career and Talent Development office located? Okay, can you point? Share? Okay, back this way. Okay, 2852. Can you find us online?
Yes.
Yes, where can you find us online if you want to request an appointment? Yes, you can also find us in Handshake, fiu.joinhandshake.com. Visit So all our events, everything, jobs, internships, Handshake is also your best friend. And didn't you all go into the career website earlier? That's your third best friend. Any final questions? Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you today.